Hi everyone, this is Andrew and JC with Sasquatchers here again for what will be a Sasquatchers first with a lot of the topics that we're going to cover here tonight. We are being joined by two very interesting guests that I'm really excited to speak with. And so I'm going to go ahead and give you a bio on them. We'll start with Dan Baldwin, and he is a professional writer, often a ghostwriter for other professionals. He has written and co-written or ghosted more than 60 books and has won numerous local, regional, and national awards. He is a certified clinical hypnotherapist, plays Native American flute, and is an expert pendulum dowser, having used the pendulum to assist in finding missing persons for over 15 years. In addition to that, we are joined by George Sewell. I hope I said that correctly. He describes himself as a cognitive philanthropist. He's a lifelong interest in study of the paranormal and UFO phenomenon. He is the author of Habits, Patterns, and Thoughts That Go Bump in the Night, A Gnome, a Candle, and Me. Ask the FAQs, please, about alcohol and drug abuse, co-authored with Dan Baldwin. And the novel is the Krismere and a Turn at the Point. As a playwright, he has written for community theater, college theater, dinner theaters, for which he was awarded the Louisiana Division of the Arts Fellowship in Theater Playwriting. He has a graduate degree in drama and communications from University of New Orleans and counseling from Louisiana Tech. Occasionally, he is retired as a counselor, program manager, and administrator in the field of addictive disorders, including problem gambling. He lives in, I'm going to try to say this correctly, Bosser City, Louisiana. And we're going to have a pretty awesome in-depth discussion about all of those topics after the intro.
The truth is out there. Never stop looking. Never be sheep. Always disrupt. We are the ungovernable. We are the truth seekers. We are Sasquatchers.
And welcome to the show, Dan and George. I hope you are having an awesome evening tonight.
Awesome and getting better.
Absolutely.
Hopefully,
probably going downhill.
Hopefully, we can keep you entertained here. I typically am not great at the whole public reading thing, so I apologize that I made you guys sit through that. But I was trying to be super respectful of all of the information for our guests. I'm always like embarrassed when I have to read. You know, I can talk all day, but as soon as I have to read, I go back to being in middle school and mispronouncing things in the class, laughing and making fun of me, and it's just all traumatic.
It's okay, we're embarrassed for you, so
that's great. But
all right, good podcast. Talk to you later.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there with your bios, and one thing that I think is like super cool is dowsing, and that's something that we haven't talked about yet on this program. And so I thought it would be cool if just right out of the gate we can kind of kick it off with that and maybe learn some stuff, because I don't know much about it. So, and it's inquisitively, I would really like to learn about it. One thing that I do want to start with, just because I have heard it's possible, and that's like dowsing, not just as a way to communicate with people from beyond, but like as a tool to help find lost things. That, like, I have heard stories that people have been able to find car keys that were in fields using dowsing rods. So I guess right out of the gate, is something like that possible?
No, absolutely. Let me give you the stripped down version of it. But I think everybody's pretty familiar with the old farmer with the old witching stick out looking for water. And when you come across the water, the stick will turn down. Well, pendulum dowsing is the same thing, except we use a rock on a string, nothing more than a weight. And something I have to add automatically. There's no magic in this. It is merely a weight on a string. But what happens is you start moving it, or you'll ask a question. And if the thing swings to the right, that's a yes. If it swings to the left, that's a no. And if it goes back and forth, you probably need to rephrase the question. And simply the way it works is while your conscious mind is looking at this, your subconscious mind takes over, and your subconscious addresses the departed spirits or the Akashic records or the infinite, however you want to describe it, the information that is out there. That information is downloaded to your subconscious. Your subconscious mind manipulates the fingers in your muscles in your fingers to manipulate the device. And it's a simple process of elimination. You ask questions and you get answers. It's time consuming, but one of the reasons George and I like it so much is it's very accurate in terms of missing persons. And again, it's like any other tool. The user can be very accurate. He can have good days. He can have bad days. But on good days, I've been able to locate missing persons down to an area the size less than a football field.
Yeah, that's incredible.
From like 1,000 miles away or 3,000 miles away. I've worked cases in Ireland, France, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Canada, in the United States. So, time and distance means absolutely nothing to it.
Well, how did you get into all of this?
It goes back about 25 years. I felt at one time an overwhelming urge to find missing children. It was one of those voices, interior voices out of the blue. And it was like a command, and it would not leave me alone. And so after about 3 months of dealing with it, I finally decided to I'm not an investigator. I'm not a cop. I'm not a trained investigator. But my family has always had a psychic bent to us. So I said maybe I can, I can use my. If I have psychic abilities, I can find it and use it. And through trial and error, I came upon the pendulum and said, "Hey, I can do that." And since then, I've practiced it. I'm basically self-taught. I've written several books on the technique. And again, I like it because unlike some other things like tarot card readings or looking at a crystal ball, there's not a lot of interpretation involved. You get very specific answers to very specific questions. And one of the things that's helped George and me in our paranormal research is in dealing with the spirit world, you can have long-term conversations. You're not depending on maybe a rap on the wall or somebody throwing a rock at you or maybe getting one word. George and I have had conversations up to 20 minutes with the spirit world simply because we can use the pendulum dowsing technique to keep the thing going. That's it in a nutshell.
That's super, super cool. I am very interested in all of it, but the missing persons aspect in particular. Do you work with, in accordance with police when you do that? Have they come to you for your knowledge and expertise? How do you end up, being assigned or assigning yourself to, a certain missing person?
It varies. Normally, it comes to a family member or a friend, and then we, when doing it, we only work through the police agency that is in charge of that particular investigation. If a family member brings a case, and the case is accepted, we contact the police and we work through the police, not the family. And so we give our information to the police, and they can do with it as they want. The interesting thing is, if you talk to administrators, they're politicians, so they got to, no psychic stuff. If you talk to street cops, they're wide open to it, wide open to it, because they deal with it every day. They call it cop instinct. We call it psychic ability.
Oh, that's really cool then that they're accepting of that. It's something that you often have to like consider, like public interpretation of what you're doing is different for every single person. And when you get into paranormal stuff and psychic stuff, like it seems like it's almost hot or cold, hit or miss. Anytime one person 5 feet away from another person is very accepting and willing to learn and treat you guys with respect, and then I feel like right next to him is somebody that will immediately cast it aside. And so it's cool that the police in particular are accepting of what you're doing.
Yeah, I was working a case in a county up north of here, and it was on a weekend, and we had there were several of us out there. In addition to doing the psychic work with the pendulum, I used to go out with the search and recovery crew, and we were out on Saturday, and I was with these two deputy sheriffs, and both of them told me, he said, "We do not believe in the psychic business at all." He said, "But what you guys have come up with, only we and the killers know. So we're out here, you guys have got something. So we're giving up our day off to come out here and work on the information that you provided."
Yeah, that's really cool. I know the town cops that I have out here are all pretty rough to do anything with. They're very mean to most of us. So it's super cool that you have those experiences. What would be something that you would describe as like the most difficult case of finding a missing person that you've experienced?
Oh, no, they're all difficult. They're all challenging. The hardest ones are the ones where you have information and it's not enough information.
I see. And so, do you?
For example, I located where someone had been murdered, gone missing, but the location was right next to a river, and the person had fallen down into the river. So I knew where it happened, but the body had washed 100 miles away. You can't bring closure on a situation like that. And other times, when you do find someone, even if it's a body, you're able to bring closure to the family.
Yeah.
So I've seen some well, I don't want to say research. I've seen some items in the past that when dowsing was introduced into certain forensic investigations and then admitted into evidence in a court, that it's immediately thrown out.
Psychic evidence is not admissible in court, and the cops know that. But what we can do is we can't go to court, but we can give you information so that you can go out and find information legally, and then you can take that to court.
Now, do you meet with the officers on every occasion, or do you do a lot of remote work, or
both?
Yeah, because you said it kind of transcends time and
time and distance are meaningless. Like I said, I worked a case that was over in Colorado. I worked it from here in Mesa, Arizona, and located the remains without ever going there.
Do you have you ever worked a case where you were able to help find a missing person that had still been alive at that point?
Yeah, that it happens. The trouble with psychics, we're trying to get the authorities to treat vetted psychics, not the guy down on the street corner, but guys that men and women who do this all the time. Treat us as you would with at least the dignity of an anonymous call.
It looks like we lost.
But we have. Usually, what I'm leading to is a lot of times we've tried everything else. We may as well try these psychics. And by the time they bring the psychics in, the missing person is already gone.
I see.
Mm.
Uh,
How did the technicality of dowsing? So I know, like, for all of our viewers, and this is kind of already talked about, but it went from, you know, everyone's image is, like you said, the guy walking around the field with,
Yeah.
you know, the fork stick and that downturned. And how did it go from something like that to now using, I mean, does it have to just be a pendulum? Can you use,
No, not at all. No.
so
No,
like I could take, like, not to be funny or anything, but like I could use the boom arm on my mic if I wanted,
Yeah.
correct?
If you can hold
Okay.
this loose enough, you can hold this loose enough
Yeah.
so that it can go one way or the other. You can stand up and use your body, you know. Which way should I go? If you lean this way, you lean that way. You know, if it goes to the right, that's a yes. If you go to the left, this little thing here, it's a woman's necklace. I just picked it up. I was at a rock store, and I like the rock, so I said that'd make a good pendulum.
Yeah. I thought we were showing off rosaries when we first pulled those out at first. So I was like, let me.
but
So
if it's a weight on the string, you can douse.
Did you have another point, JC?
I was gonna just go further that, you know, just thinking, is there ever gonna be a time that you think, because obviously now if there are detectives and law enforcement reaching out for your opinions in that so that they can go and actually enter stuff into legal evidence, do you ever see that dowsing could be on that level of being able to be included into?
I don't see that in the near future. It's against the psychic world is, I don't want to say hit or miss, but a psychic is like anybody else. You have good days and you have bad days. A psychic with a head cold is not going to have a good reading.
Right.
Just
Yeah, and I'm not a law expert by any means. I think Drew has a little bit more law training than me, or at least he likes to pretend and say that.
But one of the things again with the work George and I do, we're constantly double checking and fact checking ourselves.
How did the two of you end up working together?
George's fault. George did it.
It's all George's fault.
Yeah.
Come on, George.
I'll let George do it. Tell him, George. You're the one that started this mess back in what, 1975?
Yeah, 75, 76. At that time, Dan was living in Shreveport, Louisiana, as was I. And it turns out we were also writing freelance for a local magazine. I was covering arts and entertainment, and Dan was a feature writer. And the editor of the magazine was kind of intrigued with both of our materials. And he contacted me one day and said, George, you need to meet this fella, Dan Baldwin. He's a pretty good writer, and I think you two would get along. And he made the same invitation to Dan. So we got together, had a beer, and been making mischief ever since.
It's one of the best.
Sounds like how
stories.
we start. That's how we started the podcast.
Yeah. Hey, it's a system. It works.
Yeah. So with your background in writing, and I believe, George, it was you who had the drama and communications. Have you ever kind of faced scrutiny for just having a background in that type of stuff when it comes to the work that you do? Like, do you ever kind of face people that might say that you are, I don't know, maybe dramatizing when it, like, in regards to this type of work that you're doing now that's separate?
Well, I've been interested in the paranormal all my life. I've read extensively in it. I've had a number of experiences, talked with many people, in particular with the the UFO. Again, I remember the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, since the 1980s, and in the early 90s, I was the assistant to the state director in Louisiana for MUFON, and had a lot of opportunity to meet a lot of people who had had encounters and other experiences with what we would call the UFO phenomenon. I would basically, because of my counseling background, I'm a good listener, and I'm very confidential, very comfortable in finally being able to tell someone their story, because who can you talk to? If family wouldn't listen, you can't take it to your pastor for sure. Probably not going to go tell your doctor. So that was the main service I was able to provide. Dan often accompanied me with these interviews, and the people were not so much trying to find an explanation for what they had experienced, but just to tell about it, just to unload it, just to kind of get it off their chest, so to speak. And not always, but a lot of them, they had an interpretation of the experience that somehow it was meant for them, that somehow it was directed to them. And I wasn't quite sure how to interpret that until an event when Dan and I were researching for the Lindsay Higgins book, Paranormal Pendulum 3, where we actually had an event that was personally directed what they were talking about. So I've been very active in the field when Dan was doing his research for his pendulum dowsing books on using the pendulum to communicate with the dearly departed and what the dearly departed have to say. I was with him for a lot of that research, and I was just absolutely intrigued with the accuracy and the ability of the pendulum as a tool to make this kind of communication. Because in the researching the UFO type thing, I don't recall any episode of someone using that particular investigative technique. So you become acquainted with Lindsay Higgins and her story, and she wanted to know what was going on. First in mind, I got to get a hold of Dan, and let's see if we can use the pendulum as the investigative tool to find out what's going on with Lindsay Higgins. And we spent about 2 years doing that, and that resulted in the book.
That's super cool, actually. I was going to bring that up when we started to talk about the UFO stuff. In particular, just to kind of touch on some of the points that you addressed. We're big fans of MUFON here. I love MUFON. I've interacted with members of MUFON. I myself am a UFO experiencer. Our second guest ever on this show is Preston Bennett, who used to be part of MUFON. And so MUFON has a special place in my heart. And just to throw it out there, I appreciate the work that you or anybody in MUFON does in that regard. Being an experiencer, I can also say that I absolutely relate to the point that you made, wherein when I had that experience, I thought it was meant for me. And it's something that I, to this day now, several years later, I relate to, and I kind of miss it. And I oftentimes find myself seeking it out. And the night of the encounter, I actually went back out to try to experience it again, because it was almost euphoric. It was like insane to me how much it just, like you said, like I thought I saw it for a reason, and that it was there for me. So that's super interesting to hear that, you know, other people feel that way as well. Until we started having this conversation, had never even considered using this technique to have any type of conversation and draw forth a UFO encounter. So are you in this book, are you suggesting that that's something that you were able to do over the course of researching and investigating these techniques? Is that something that's entirely possible to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let me toss in some. One of the things one of the reasons I believe pendulum dowsing works so well in spirit communication and in communicating with the UFO occupants is you're dealing with the subconscious mind. In the spirit world, you're dealing with people who are at, for lack of a better term, much higher frequency. So if you're dealing with the subconscious, I think the subconscious mind can deal with that frequency much better than the conscious mind. And since a lot of the UFO material tells us that they communicate primarily through extrasensory perception, telepathy, I think the subconscious mind works very well in making that telepathic connection. And again, the pendulum is a tool to make that connection.
I see. That's really cool. So
Do you,
this is.
do you
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
I was just
JC.
saying, I'm just thinking about other uses for the tool here, and I'm not sure if this is something that's ever been utilized for. But would there be the possibility? I would think that you could even use it sort of in a medical fashion, like maybe finding tumors or localized diseases and infections, right?
Yeah, I have done a little bit of that. Only when I've been specifically requested to do that. And anytime I do that, I say yes, it can work. But after we do it, go see your regular doctor.
Sure.
In
Good
other words,
advice.
yeah. In fact, I trust my doctors implicitly. I have very good doctors, regular doctors, but I also have a healer. Thanks to George, introduced me to
Ah,
a healer. So I work with both, practical physicians and with the metaphysical doctors. But I work with
That's a
both.
that's
combo of
a
both. Yeah.
yeah. That's a really cool point. I have often considered finding a healer, but I'm also not completely against what we call Western medicine as well. I mean, I'm
Both.
like a lot of yeah. When you can take the best of both worlds, why wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know like a lot of people in our community have pretty strong feelings about Western medicine, and I mean, I listen to everybody, and I will take everybody's points, but I also like to when I'm using a MacBook right now, okay, and so when you think about the founder of Apple and how he just Steve Jobs holistically tried to treat his cancers, and I wonder how much more really positive change we could have experienced in the world had he done the best of both worlds approach instead of uh, just kind of
Yeah.
going in one direction.
He had 2 liver transplants on top of that, right? Like he was already in bad territory.
That's a fair point. Uh, but I digress. We don't have to talk about Steve Jobs. Uh,
Oh,
I'm
Well, yeah.
I'm
Let me tell
curious.
you, if I'm dealing with my healer and say she says, well, you've got a lump on your knee. We need to look at that. I would say okay. Then I would go get an X-ray.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you guys, um, you you sent in your bio some interesting things that I would be remiss if we don't cover. So I want to grab them now so we don't run out of time later on. Um, can we talk about the conversation with the ghost of Maddie Earp, the common law wife of the famous Tombstone lawman? Like, how did you guys come to have this conversation, and how did it go?
Yeah, you'll need George's feedback on this, but Maddie Earp is buried not too far from here, out in near a small town called Superior, and they're very protective of her out there. Like she has a marker, but the marker is not on her grave because they're afraid people will go out there and basically desecrate the area. But a few
Right.
people, myself included, know exactly where the unmarked area is, and so done a couple of readings out there. Made contact with Maddie. She is here, and she is on this earthly plane because she wants to be. She crossed over and then came back, and she's a very sad woman. Uh, she is helping her spirit is now helping other sad people. But I took George out to the site, and he was down at the marker and said, I'm going to go say hello to Maddie. And so George looks up, and you take it from there, George. Remember when I walked over and is he hearing us? Well, anyway, I walked over to her area and said, "Hello, Maddie," and just a wave of
I'm having some technical.
Wave of sadness just overcame me. I mean, I doubled over and just started weeping, and it lasted maybe 2 minutes, but it just came out of the blue, and it was just Maddie checking in. You know, I think she was just saying, "I appreciate you being here and respecting me."
That's super cool. That's
And I
not
saw
the
it,
first.
so yeah.
Oh, you're back.
Back for a second. Man, we haven't really ran into a plethora of technical issues so far. I wish I had some type of insight to help with it, but I unfortunately
I think I know what's up.
Okay. Is it?
It's not anything we can address, unfortunately,
Okay.
on the fly. But
in addition to that, can you tell us about the Cortland Jail in Cochise County?
Yeah, over in Cochise County, that's some friends of mine and I. They're mediums, and we met one day and decided, a bit like George and I got together a few years later, but we said, let's try to combine your mediumship with my pendulum dowsing, and see if we can make contact. And we went to it's a ghost town, Cortland. It's a ghost town. There's an old jail there, and we set up and did a reading there, and we made contact, and we said, hey, this stuff works. And that's really how I got into making contact with the spirit world. That kind of introduced me into transferring from finding missing persons to contacting people on the other side. And then when I started writing I've done several pendulum dowsing books, and when I decided to do the dowsing the departed book, George is just a natural to help George. And so I did all the research over in basically Louisiana, in an area called the Arklatex, where George lives. And so we did a tremendous amount of research using the pendulum and making. I don't think we ever struck out, did we, George? I think we made contact with someone every time we tried.
No. Correct.
Yeah, one thing we do that's interesting. We don't hold quote seances. Generally, we don't. Except Maddie Earp would be an example because we were at her site. But generally, we don't sit down and go, well, let's contact Davy Crockett, or let's see if we can call up Cleopatra, or let's call up somebody famous. We go to a site, go to a location, and very politely and with all the respect in the world, ask if there's anybody here. Is there a spirit here? And would you please, if you're willing, would you communicate with us? And the response is usually yes, always yes.
I think taking that respectful approach certainly helps your odds in getting a good and respectful response as well. I mean, just to kind of compare with what you're doing with what a lot of like YouTubers are doing right now, where they're going in and using spirit boxes and radio frequencies, and you would think that in comparison, what you're doing is a lot less overstimulating to whomever you're trying to speak to. Is there a
point?
Is there like a profound response that you get with your technique that you think other people with these more, like modernized technical approaches may not receive due to the nature of their devices?
I don't know. I don't use the devices. I've seen them used. I've been around them, but neither George nor I use them. If we want to know if a spirit is present, we don't have to look for a flashing light. We just ask.
Right. And I feel like that's almost like it's a little more personable, like when somebody wants to have a conversation with me, they speak to me, and I just feel like if I'm a spirit, I would be annoyed with all of the gadgetry and tech that's being brought out on these investigations now that you see everywhere on YouTube and on television. I think your
Yeah,
approach is it's a lot more pleasant, at least.
yeah.
And
George might want to comment on that because he said something the first time we went out. I think he was simply because he hadn't seen it done before with other psychics, but I think he was. I don't want to say impressed, but I think he noticed the fact that when I approached the spirit, it was with courtesy and respect. You want to elaborate on that? Is George there?
yeah, I think he might still be having those
Yeah, we're having
technical
some real
issues.
technical issues here.
Yeah, I was thinking
Yeah.
when we were at the museum.
With Spring
Anyway,
Street.
yeah,
Yeah. What Dan's referencing is we're using the pendulum as like a telephone, as a technical device to carry on a conversation with a fellow spirit just who happens not to be in a physical body. So we're mentally we are communicating with other souls, other spirits who have had earth experiences. So we have some commonalities, and with the pendulum, we're able to carry on conversations, albeit we have to ask the questions. The questions have to be precise because we're going to get a yes or a no or a neutral swing from the pendulum. But you can build a very, very detailed and informative conversations process if you'll give it time. And if you have developed the ability to keep yourself and your experience.
yeah. One thing I tell people when especially when they're beginning to do this type of work is when you go into a so-called haunted house, you're still going into somebody's house. You know, the spirit that is there is probably the spirit that lived there, raised their family there. Had a complete life there. It's it's still their place. Even though they recognize you as being in the 21st century, they also are living in the house and experiencing it as it was back in their day. So you're in their house. So you wouldn't want somebody coming in your house with a specific goal of provoking you to get a response, to challenging you. You want to have a conversation. You want to be polite. You want to say, can we talk? And they like to talk.
You had mentioned
They like to talk.
George when you were when you were elaborating about a yes response, a no response, and you said a neutral response. So I'm assuming a neutral response is that there is no movement. But what do you discern the answer to be when you receive a neutral response?
Most of the time, it's rephrase the question.
Mm-hmm.
And then so you rephrase, and typically then you'll get the yes or no then. So it's more or less asking for that.
Correct.
As that via misunderstanding, or just because they don't like the way you asked it.
They may not be able to answer the question as it was asked with an accurate response.
I see.
Yeah, I want to say yes to it, but if I say yes to it, you're going to take it in a different way. Rephrase the question, that type of thing.
Yeah, for example, you can't ask a question. Is this missing person blonde or brunette? There's no way to get a yes or no answer out of that. You have to ask, is this missing person blonde? Yes or no. Is this missing person a brunette? Yes or no. Is this missing person redhead? Yes or no. So you've got to phrase it very, very carefully.
So a neutral response essentially is just as helpful as a yes or no, in your conversation, because then it will then point you to the direction that you need to go. So uh, if we were to try this and then end up with a bunch of neutral responses, it's not necessarily something that we're doing incorrectly. It's just a matter of better interpretation and our performance in our conversation.
Yeah, and sometimes it's it's I'm not going to tell you. It may not be in your best interest to learn that specific amount of information.
Yeah.
You're not, when you're using the pendulum, you're not commanding the spirit. If he or she doesn't want to answer a question, they don't have to.
On that note, I have a question for you. While you are having these conversations, and for instance, if you are talking to a spirit looking for a missing person, have you ever encountered one that isn't being particularly helpful,
Yes.
in a way to mess with you? Like they're doing it on purpose to maybe draw you away from the answers you're looking for?
Um, uh, sort of, yes. I've done a couple of investigations for the missing person where we've encountered I was working with a couple of mediums, and we've encountered the spirit of the missing person. I'm thinking specifically of a plane crash, and the spirit was a woman. She said, "We're not going to help you find me, and you're not going to find me for at least a year, because I do not want my mother to see me the way I look right now." So, the spirit had an emotional response, and the spirit was actually working against us finding her at that time. That's happened a couple of times.
For fear of what the living relatives would
Yeah.
encounter.
Yeah. Because it was a plane crash. Her body was just, when we found her, it just mangled. So she did not want her mother to have to experience that, even in a description, much less a photograph.
I can understand that. Definitely, especially if you're in rough shape. I guess I've never even considered that one might not want to be found in that state. So that's kind of eye opening for me to hear. Have you
They can be
ever?
they
Oh,
can be
go ahead.
playful too. They can be playful too.
And how do you? Or do
You
you
know
have
where
any
I'm you know
stories with
where I'm
that?
leading, George. You know where I'm leading. WD.
Mm-hmm.
It's about
Yeah. What Dan is kind of what Dan's alluding to is that in the course of communicating with various individuals over a couple of years, primarily researching the book, you get acquainted with them. You get to know the personalities. And one of the personalities that we were dealing with was how would you describe WD?
a rake.
He was a likable fellow who his story is, well, he's buried here in Shreveport, Louisiana. I think he passed in the early 20th century, but he was born in England and came to the United States as a young man, and this was during the Civil War, and he was with the Union Army, and then during that war. Somehow he ended up in Louisiana, and a rather interesting fellow, because after the army, and allegedly he was shot with a bow and arrow and also with a bullet, and that damaged his eye. So he was, for all practical purposes, blind, or certainly he played the role of being mostly blind. Dan and I kind of think he a lot more. He played a lot of cards, but just an interesting fellow. And we were having a pendulum session with the spirits of the founders of that particular thing. It was germane to the research, and Dan was over at the house, and we were playing back the recording just to make sure we got everything. um, came a very strong masculine voice stating very clearly, "Lindsay is key." What? Where the hell that come from?
Right.
So we replayed it half a dozen times, and just overlaid on the recording was this very firm, "Lindsay is key." And Lindsay was, of course, the primary character. But so a couple of weeks later, Dan's back in Arizona, and he's doing the transcript from the recording, and there's no "Lindsay is key" there. And played it again. "Lindsay is key" was not on the tape at that time. So WD, I suspect, was giving us a little take his voice on a
I don't know. It
Well,
sounded like we almost lost you again.
anyway,
there for a
yeah.
second,
Just the
George.
point is, WD was quite a character, and for some reason he took a liking to me and George, and he kept showing up in different readings. We would be researching something entirely different, and then WD would show up. Our mediums would say, "Hey, this guy just walked in. WD, is that you?" "Yeah, that's me." So he was just kind of hanging around, being a pal. So if it stands to reason, if you're a character on this side, once you go through the light and you're on the other side, chances are you're probably still a bit of a character, at least for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so. It would be kind of a bummer if when you cross over that you don't get to carry over that your personality traits. So I have a question. Have you ever been asked to, or have you ever just done it on your own? Have you ever used these techniques to the search for Sasquatch, or would that something like that be possible?
Oh yeah. I just focused. We're focused right now on this area, this specific area, and there's just not enough time to cover everything. It's pretty hard as it is to keep from going down different side trails in the research that we're doing. But if you wanted to research Sasquatch, there's absolutely no reason you can't use pendulum dowsing to do it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
A good question would be, is this a good idea to go there is this a good idea for me to do this?
Right.
They may want to be left alone.
Yeah, and just in the course of it, some of our investigations, because we've been branching out from not just doing this show, but we're doing actual research and investigations ourselves in documentary films, and this is one of the techniques that I had kind of low key was considering maybe trying to learn so that we could incorporate it into what we're doing. Specifically, we're more very like cryptid and monster. I'd have to call us a monster hunter or something to that effect. But some of the things we're looking for are very scary and dangerous. And I guess I'm looking for all techniques that we can learn to use to find them. And so this might be something to look into. I'll have to grab your books and learn the techniques.
Yeah, send me an email. I can show you a couple of tips.
Oh,
but yeah,
cool.
there's absolutely. I mean, if we can, George and I can contact, ET way out yonder.
He's got it.
There's no reason you can't. Maybe I don't know if you can contact Sasquatch or not, but you can certainly find out. Where is Sasquatch? Where are they? Where's their camp? Where are they moving? Where are they now? Where is it likely they will be tomorrow? Is it safe for me to do this? Should I bring candy? But yeah, it should be an effective tool.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to try this.
I mean, why not? Right? Like it'd be the course of us to not attempt every method.
Exactly. That is the true scientific method, is to take all of these things and hypothesize and then
Well,
see
yeah,
it
if you
through.
do, let us know how it goes.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, for
absolutely.
sure. Yeah, in June we're going out. We're going to do a Sasquatch camp excursion, and we're also working on something. You called that spirit WD a rake, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's just the
You
terminology.
met Hellraiser, right? Like
Right.
Hellraiser,
guy,
yeah. Character.
not the rake as in the monster, the rake that lives out in the
No,
woods.
no.
Yeah. I am.
Rake in the sense that his wife took out ads. I am not responsible for my husband's drinking debts in the local newspaper.
Gotcha. Yeah,
But
I figured so.
when you said that,
He's one of our pals. He's a running buddy. He's a running buddy.
when you said that, my mouth dropped because that's what I'm working on right now. You know, JC and we're like very deeply rooted in this documentary about rakes or crawlers, tail crawlers. Like they have so many names. So when you said that, I was like, oh man, this is like
No,
synchronicity.
Now the
no,
guy just liked to drink.
no. Drink, play cards.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
but
it's not very often you hear that term anymore. That's definitely an older term used for somebody like that. Nicer term too, I would think.
Well,
Not to switch subjects up on us or anything, but before we run out of time, I wanted to see if I could get to George on something. So I'd been on his website, and I was, just kind of popping around in there, creeping on everything he has, and I saw he has recently, as of the end of last year, he had quite a few photos of what appear to be orbs, specifically blue orbs and some other objects in the sky. Was there a specific, were these just things that you happened to capture on film, or were you conducting a specific investigation?
Not by any intent. I was just photo at a local park where I freeze, and in the photo appeared a very luminous orb, which I could not see, but somehow the camera captured. And well, that's kind of fun. Kind of tossed it off as a lens flare. But as I kept returning to the park day after day, I said, well, let me recreate that photograph from the same position, roughly the same time of day. And boom, there was another orb in it. So, okay, this is cool. So I made that a habit. And after 10 trips, I had pictures of about 7 orbs that I could not see, but the camera could. And I say, something's going on here. There's something going on here. So I sent all the pictures out to Dan in Arizona and said, Dan, take your pendulum, take a look at this. What the hell's going on? And what he came back with was the orb is a spirit known to you, but not in this lifetime. And I said, what the hell? And that started a search, if you will, for who was the spirit that this orb that my camera is photographing was previously, and eventually came up with, it was an American actress called Kate Bateman. And we have a ton of information on Kate and how I was acquainted with her at some point. So that was kind of what got the orbs going. I was out taking a walk the day before yesterday to look at the camera, and there it is again. So there's whatever it is, that's part of what's going on with this whole thing Dan and I are researching. It's just one way of saying, keep it up. We're here. We got information for you. We want to show you something. So I'm not sure what we're going to do with all these photographs, but I did post some of them on my website just to let some folks see that there's nothing consistent about them. There's any number of shapes, black bricks,
Yeah,
diamond shape, orbs, lights. It's runs the gamut, but the camera does.
Yeah, I saw specifically there were some that you had photographed that were like 3 or 4 objects, and they seemed to be transparent. They were in the sky, and that something that we are still waiting to discuss here. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this before, but they're called atmospheric beasts, atmospheric animals that are carbon-based creatures that supposedly inhabit the atmosphere. So that first thing I thought when I saw that those transparent objects in your photographs was, these really remind me of kind of like those, people call them like sky jellyfish and stuff like that. But
I have a question real quick based off of what you were just describing.
Whatever.
So you said that this actress Kate was someone that you had known from previously. So
Bateman.
is this like a someone that you knew from a previous life, or was this someone that you just kind of knew when you were younger and moved on from?
We
I mean, she was an
actress
a very long time ago. Right?
Paranormal Kate. Book and themes in the book. It's quite an interesting chapter.
Yeah, like that. I think that's pretty neat. Again, everybody who might be listening or watching this right now on our YouTube channel, check these books out. We will advertise. We always in our show notes we put all of your information in the in the notes for people to see every link. But when we wrap the show up, we do like to just pass it over to the guests real quickly so that they can advertise everything that you're doing. So this is as good a time as any here to go ahead and give the two of you the floor, and feel free to promote anything and everything that you have available for people to check out.
Grift away, man.
Well, I'll jump in. All of my books are available in ebook and paperback, and a lot of them in hardback. Wherever you order your books, you can order my books, and I have everything from novels, westerns, mysteries, thrillers, political thrillers, mainstream fiction. I also have half a dozen paranormal books, including the paranormal pendulum books. I also have books on psychic detecting, how to be. I've got the psychic detective guidebook, and I've got a few other odds and ends. But if you check out the normal sources, you can order my books. From Amazon, Kindle, Barnes and Noble, wherever. They're all out there, and will be much appreciated.
Yes, for sure. Check his stuff out. And George?
Pretty much the same thing. If you go to my website, www.george.e, be sure you get that middle initial E-N, Sewell. Presentations there of my various books, which are self-help, science fiction, a novel, and of course, Paranormal Pendulum 3, and a number of other postings that would be of interest. Right now, I've got just a whole number of photographs that were taken during the period of research for Paranormal Pendulum 3 book, and that's pretty interesting photographs. Again, I don't see what is captured by the camera, but it makes for some interesting viewing.
Awesome. Very cool. So before we go, I want to draw attention to one thing, and it's very important to me. John Stewart would call this your moment of Zen. I see that you have your book, just the FAQs, please, about alcohol and drug abuse. Um, we are a paranormal podcast, so I didn't really bring that up, but I was curious if you guys could maybe just describe that real briefly before we end this episode. It's near, that topic is near and dear to me. I was 17 when my mother died of a drug overdose. My brothers went through the system because their father also months later died of a drug overdose. My dad eventually, died from cancer. That was for sure started up due to his drinking habits. So I have seen these topics firsthand in all of the extremely negative ways that they can affect a human. So I saw that, and I would be remiss if I didn't at least ask about that and allow you guys the opportunity to discuss that book before we take off.
Yeah. Well, what brought the book about was my vocation for over 30 years was as a counselor and therapist, primarily in an outpatient, the whole gamut. So I was thoroughly versed in the disease and all of its aspects, and was wanting to do some research for an article he was writing, and he was asking what alcohol and drug abuse and whatnot. And other than, well, there's a lot of research books out there, there's a lot of personal stories out there, but as far as something to give a lay reader a nice overview of the whole spectrum, really couldn't think of any particular book that would satisfy what he was looking for. So let's write it. So we decided, let's get together and let's write the book that Dan was looking for, that I knew was not on anybody's shelf. And that led to that particular publication.
All right. Well, really cool, neat. JC told me to stop saying super cool and really cool all the time, so I'll say neato. And I will thank
Peachy,
you for
just peachy.
peachy.
Just
That's
peachin'.
super peachy. But I want to thank you for that as well. As somebody that has, like I said, seen literally every side effect of those disorders, and I won't even call it a disease. It's important that things like that exist. So I just want to go ahead and thank you for writing the book.
Yeah, we're proud of it.
Okay, and with that,
Sure.
we will go ahead and we'll play our outro. We'll keep you guys on for just a minute after the show is complete, so that we can make sure all of our technical stuff is good. But I want to go ahead and thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure, and remind our audience to check our show notes and find all of the links and search out all of these books and support these guys. And have a good evening.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank-
Loved it.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for squatching, everybody.
Hey, that was